This is the Sunday stream opening song because the other song is copyrighted. La 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 la. Oh look, here comes Dog Cat Fox.
Hi, Sky.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday stream. The stream I do on Sundays because Sunday is the day to stream on Sundays. Hope you're all doing well this morning. I'm doing much better than I was the other day with a migraine, but migraine is now gone. Fingers crossed, don't have another one of those for a while, but who knows? Also, happy Mother's Day for those of you out there who are mothers. So, yes, I am going to be calling my mother after the show to say good morning and happy Mother's Day, because she's probably, hopefully, still sleeping. And then later this month, my sister Scribe and I are going to go visit said parental units to do a combination Mother's Day and birthday thing for me, because this is my birthday month, sometime within. Oh boy, being older. Anyway, who's joining me on this lovely Sunday morning? Zalbla! Long time no see, I think, right? How's it going? Keeverdam, Somnamnule Nation, Ryan R., TFAorix, or TFAO Prescription. TFAO Prescription? I don't know. Let's see, who else is here? Bridget, Spittlebuggies, good morning. And who else? Mike R., good morning. And those of you that are either joining us in the lurking phase or in the future. So what's on deck today? Well, I thought I'd revisit one of my favorite subjects, employee resource groups. For those of you that don't know about employee resource groups, well, we're going to learn about them today. And for a change, I'm going to let our speakers guide the actual presentation, rather than me blabbing on about what I think I know about employee resource groups as a preamble, because God knows we'll get into it probably. But yes, this comes from a group or a company or something called TechSoup. Never heard of them before, but they've got a whole bunch of videos on their YouTube channel, and this one popped up in my radar, so to speak. And I hadn't looked at the card here real quick. Executive Director's ED chat. Well, I'm glad they specified that, because otherwise I might have thought it was erectile dysfunction chat, which would be a completely different situation. A couple of editing notes. I did scan the opening part of this to make sure there wasn't any long drawn out introductions or thank yous and things that had nothing to do with the presentation. And there were. So there's a couple of jumps in the early stages of this, but after that, we get into the presentation proper. If you'd like to see the full presentation for whatever reason, the link is in the description. And also, if you'll direct your attention to the top of the chat box at one point or another, thank you, Keeverdam, again, for the GoFundMe's pin there for our friends Shady Grin, Angry Illinoisian, and his kitten. Their friends, and loved ones could certainly use your help if you have a couple of bucks to spare. So, with all of that as preamble, a couple more hellos, and then we'll get into it. The Magister, hello. This is Kyle, hello. Arc210, Brett Ide, Chicago Mike, Mike Savage, Blarg. Good morning. So, with that, let's all learn about the function, utility, purpose, and reasoning behind employee resource groups as of April 6th, 2022. So we'll get all the new thinking, I assume.
Thanks for joining Executive Director's Chat with TechSoup. We call this ED Chat, and I love this platform because I get to see your faces.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you can see my face. Wait, what?
I love this. So I hope you bought notes. You can screenshot the chat room, but I hope you bought pen and paper to take notes. Today's topic is employee resource groups. Now, This was new to me. It may be new to many of you, but I'm hoping you're going to get some takeaways and get some ideas for your community engagement, business needs, social networking, and professional development.
Maybe I've just been marinating in this for too long. Are employee resource groups not relatively well known as a concept at this stage of the game? I suppose not. I mean, I'm not saying our speaker's a liar. It just seems like it's been around for a long time now.
As it pertains to your nonprofit. My name is Aretha Simons.
Nonprofit? Why does that matter?
I'm the webinar producer here at TechSoup.
Mm-hmm.
Getting into today's discussion, Employee Resource Group. Today we have Jasmine Malone. She is the EIDC intern here at TechSoup. So
Okay.
I'm going to turn it over to Jasmine, and you and Lori can bounce back together and share with us about our affinity groups, and you can let me know when you want me to share the screen. So over.
Whoa, affinity groups? Well, wait a second now. Wait a second. Affinity groups? Are you guys conjoining those two things together? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, but still a little odd.
To you, Laura.
So thank you so much for having us, and hi to everybody from all over the country and all over the world. I saw Australia there in the chat somewhere. It seems really early for you, so really happy to have you here too. So as Aretha said, my name is Laura Ross Perry. I have been working at TechSoup for about 2.5 years now. I'm a program development manager, and I work with our global network of nonprofits. So these are nonprofits that help to deliver our discounted and donated technology programs and support and training to other nonprofits all over the world.
Okay.
So a little bit about how employee resource groups started at TechSoup.
Okay. Whoa.
So I'll start talking a little bit about the background.
I thought we were in an episode of the Brady Bunch there for a second.
Background of affinity groups or employee resource groups.
Okay, so affinity groups, employee resource groups, these are one and the same thing in this area. Oh boy, I can already see from this card it's going to be interesting.
How those started at TechSoup.
Okay.
And I think the most important thing for me when I think about our journey is that it was incredibly organic. So we didn't.
It was completely organic, you say?
Didn't have a diversity, equity, inclusion program whatsoever at TechSoup. We didn't have anybody who was officially in a position there, either in our people and culture team or otherwise.
Is that because it was not necessary by any chance? So how did it come about organically?
So Lashika Phillips, who is on the call here as well, she is now the director of our Equity, Inclusion, Diversity, and Culture program. But back in October 2019, we didn't have that program at all. She held a completely different role at TechSoup, and she took it upon herself for TechSoup to run a diversity month a global diversity month in October of 2019.
She took it upon herself. So one person came along and instilled. Is that organic? I don't know if that's organic.
So she got together a couple of different staff members, and we put together a couple different programs. And that was actually my very first month at TechSoup ever. So that was a great time for me to start.
What problem did that solve? I mean, what utility was initiating those projects, programs?
But since that Global Diversity Month, there garnered some more interest from different people at TechSoup, all not working in equity, inclusion, diversity, but all passionate about that type of work, passionate about bringing in different voices, highlighting different communities within TechSoup and within our nonprofit network, and bringing that into TechSoup and having more of a program. So from there, we kind of formalized what we now consider a diversity council at TechSoup.
A diversity council. Doesn't sound Orwellian at all.
Called Bridge, and our diversity council stands for belonging, respect, inclusion, diversity, and global equity.
Oh wow, that's a big one. I'm still waiting for diversity, equity, belonging, and inclusion, because I really think there's a case for Debbie. So
from that kind of large diversity council, we started running different events, highlighting different communities, bringing different speakers on. But organically from that, we kind of grew a need to focus on different areas.
I like how she's sort of dancing around this. She seems very uncomfortable in places here. Thank you, Chicago Mike. Uniting diversity by separation. Yeah, let's divvy everybody up. Let's divvy everybody up. Okay, so I wonder are they going to come back to that card? I can't get a preview thing on here, because if they don't come back to that card that she had up a minute ago, I'm going to go back to it myself and read it, because it looked very interesting. So there was parts of the Diversity Council that were really focused and interested in issues that relate to the LGBTQ community. Some that were really interested in issues that relate to racial justice and anti-discrimination work and so on. And what do any of these things have to do with your business?
So actually, I am a member of the Racial Justice Allyship Group.
Let me guess. You're an ally, right? You have to be categorized as an ally.
But I can tell you a little bit more about how that started. It actually didn't start as a Racial Justice Allyship Group.
Oh, how did it start?
We broke off initially from Bridge to be just an allyship group.
Just an allyship group. Okay, so Bridge was the sort of council or organizing principle, and then there was an allyship group because simply being a part of the organization or council itself wasn't good enough. You then had to portion off who belonged under a different category as an ally. You can't just be part of the group. You have to. Okay, so why?
So that was our first kind of affinity group there.
Why is that an affinity group? Why couldn't you just be part of Bridge? Why did you need to subcategorize yourselves? And who is in that group? What defines someone as an ally versus being part of the larger organization, I guess?
We wrote a mission statement and we decided that we were going to be a group that focused on being allies. As we kind of went on and as the months progressed, we realized that was also too large for us. That was also not focused enough for the interests of the particular people in the group. And so we kind of got together and we said, okay, we can be allies for many different things, but how can we be most useful? How can we bring most visibility to a specific community, both within the nonprofits that we work with and within our own organization?
So you subdivided yourselves into the Racial Justice Allyship Group. Okay.
And we decided to focus specifically on racial justice.
All right. Well, I'm curious to know. Sorry for keep cutting her off, but the questions keep abounding. I'm curious to find out if she mentions how the allyship group brought more racial justice to their network of nonprofits.
Within our own organization. And we decided to focus specifically on racial justice, especially after the George Floyd murders and murder and everything that came after that.
Yeah,
we thought that highlighting racial justice within TechSoup as well as within the network was the most important thing for us right now and our priority.
Okay. What examples of racial injustice were taking place in TechSoup prior to the creation of this group? And how have you worked to resolve those issues in the interim?
So that's kind of the genesis of the Racial Justice Allyship Group, which is one of 4 groups that we have at TechSoup right now. And I'll just give a couple of examples of what our group does.
Okay.
So we really want to focus on racial justice and anti-discrimination, not only within TechSoup internally, but externally. I've mentioned that several times, but for TechSoup, it's really important for us to think about how we can integrate affinity groups and this type of work into our internal programming, our internal culture, our retention rates, our diverse recruitment, things like that. But
you want to fight back against discrimination by instituting employee resource groups, which are groups created specifically for specific demographics. And there's a subgroup on the side for allies. And this helps your diversity recruitment. And you're working against discrimination. Okay.
But also to take it externally and think about the communities that we work with, think about the funders that we work with, the nonprofits that we serve. So it's really an internal and external thing at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
So for the Racial Justice Allyship Group, one of the things that we did was to work with our people and culture team to update a document that we have called Help Me Hire. It's a document that was developed probably back in 2014, 2015, and hadn't really been updated since. Okay. And it's meant to guide hiring managers through the hiring process.
Oh, okay. Well, you have my interest now. Okay. So how did you update your hiring policies / practices through the Racial Justice Allyship Group?
Through writing job descriptions, posting on different sites, holding interviews and such. Yeah. But there wasn't enough information in there focused on on embedding equity, embedding diversity, inclusion and culture elements into all steps of the recruitment process and the retention process.
I am dying to hear some examples of what you now added in there to solve this problem.
So the People and Culture team actually reached out to the Racial Justice Allyship Group and a couple other affinity groups to say, we want to update this document, and you are valued resources that will be able to help us do this in an equitable way. So for the past few months, we've been holding several different meetings, and we have finally gotten to the point where we have, excuse me, an updated document that really embeds elements of EIDC, which is what we call our program, EIDC, into that whole process. And so then we're going to be rolling that out to hiring managers.
Examples, please, or contrast what was there or was absent and that you've now added or revised.
So that's one example of how we are working with our People and Culture team, and how affinity groups are integrated into potentially changing the culture within TechSoup.
Okay. I know, I'm a broken record. How was the culture in TechSoup flawed, and or what was it missing? What was it doing wrong? And how has any or all of this improved or corrected that?
And then externally, we have also been doing direct outreach to nonprofits that are focused on racial justice and focused on anti-discrimination. We've been inviting them to come and speak at TechSoup.
So you've been discriminating in what nonprofits you'll be reaching out to on the basis of there being anti-discrimination, or what?
We've been asking if there's volunteer opportunities that our staff can come and support. We've also been asking about their technology needs, because that's what TechSoup does, and thinking about ways that we can support them more, and also considering a larger kind of cohort and funding model where we fund specifically nonprofits that are focused on this work, so we can really help raise their voices and help create more impact for the work that they're doing.
Okay, so you're directing funds to organizations that promote a particular ideology that you approve of. Perfectly fine. Tell me again about anti-discrimination.
So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jasmine to talk a little bit about how I mentioned that this has all kind of grown organically at TechSoup, but in the past few months, and really spearheaded by Jasmine, we've been able to operationalize some of our affinity group work. So Jasmine, take it away.
Okay. And again, if they don't bring up that card again, listing off the different groups they have set up, I'm going to jump back to it and read it off.
Thanks, Laura. And thank you, Aretha. And then again, huge shout out to my supervisor, my boss, Alicia Phillips, who runs the Equity, Inclusion, Diversity, and Culture program.
Okay. As with so many of these presentations, everybody's using their own camera, their own equipment. So mileage is going to vary in sound quality. I did my best to just overall, tune up the sound of the overall presentation, but I didn't watch the entire thing first, obviously. So if it gets too loud or it's too echoey, guys, just let me know in the chat and I'll try to turn it down a little bit for sanity's sake. I can understand what she's saying. It's just a little too much.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jasmine. My pronouns are she and her. I am the Equity, Inclusion, Diversity, and Culture intern at TechSoup, and I have been at TechSoup since June of 2021, and so I've been doing this work since then.
This work, yes, the work. And
what I want to highlight here is before I go into a little more descriptions about Alphabet Soup, or LGBTQ+, affinity group, junior professionals, and Black allies, I saw that some folks said that you don't have an affinity group or you don't have an ERG and you're not really sure what that is. There was a link shared in the chat that goes to an article that we posted earlier this year that kind of defines and goes over the history of what an affinity group is. But for folks to know, when you're talking about affinity groups, we're talking about affinity as in folks who identify within a certain part of their identity, right?
Folks who identify within a certain part of their identity. Okay, maybe she'll come up with the card again in a minute. I don't know. I'm going to jump back a little bit just for edification's sake. Let's see, we're at 8:39. Where did that card come up briefly before she cut it off? There we go. Okay, so here are their affinity groups / employee resource groups at TechSoup. The first one Alphabet Soup, okay, for LGBTQ plus and allies, supporting inclusion and diversity of sexuality and gender within TechSoup and our greater community, spotlighting intersectionality with other identities and creating alliances. Okay, so here's my first sort of perennial question. What is my sex life, or should I say, how is my sex life my employer's business? I mean, unless that's a demographic you're aiming towards with products or services or something. But all the same, why would I want to, and why would a company desire to bring my personal life that closely into my professional life? That's always a question in my head. Junior professionals for early to mid-career professionals and allies. What's the difference? To provide opportunities for cross-departmental professional development, networking, and communication among junior professionals at TechSoup. Well, that just sounds like your sort of standard cross-training program in any company. Why? I mean, junior professionals, early to mid-career, I mean, that could be anybody. You could come into a new career as a 50-year-old and need to learn new things that, didn't apply to your previous career. So racial justice allyship for allies in racial justice, a forum for those in the TechSoup community who want to commit to be allies in the fight for racial justice. The focus of this group will be on the tactics to uncover our role in oppression and to take action. Uncover our role in oppression. So you voluntarily join this group to let everybody know that you want to be an ally for racial justice. Because if you said otherwise, then you'd be an opponent of racial justice, which I'm sure would look great in your work culture. But if you join this group, then you have to uncover your role in oppression. How deep do I have to dig to find my role in oppression as I'm going into a group specifically to virtue signal? That's got to be something. And lastly, Black allies for Black identifying and allies. I wonder what would happen if a Asian employee identified themselves as Black. What would happen in that instance? The Black Allies is a TechSoup affinity group for people who identify as Black, African American, African, Afro-Latinx, Afro-Caribbean, and allies. What constitutes an ally? Anybody who's not of a particular skin color, I'm guessing? The mission of Black Allies is to ensure the visibility, development, and inclusion of Black and African voices within the organization, our network, and the communities we serve, no period. Why isn't there an Asian allies group? Why isn't there a Native American or Indigenous allies group? Why isn't there a Veterans allies group? Why isn't there a Women's allies group? I mean, why are you so racist, sexist, intolerant of those demographics? Once you open that door, I don't know. You're asking for a lot of complications. But anyway, 8:39 we were at, so here we go. Play.
In a certain part of their identity, right? So we're talking about junior professionals. It's early career professionals, mid-career professionals who are doing professional development work together. We're talking Black allies. It's folks who identify as Black, identify as African, or part of the diaspora who are coming together with our allies, with our accomplices to...
With our allies, with our accomplices. The only time I ever hear the word accomplice used with any seriousness is in relation to a crime. Okay, so your allies and your accomplices, your co-conspirators, to do what?
Together with our allies, with our accomplices, to focus on issues or initiatives that help heighten the voices of Black folks across our organization and our network. And
okay, so how were those voices being systematically oppressed prior to the creation of this group? What problems have you solved, or what problems have you identified, and that you've introduced some new policy, procedure, guidance, or whatever? And what constitutes an ally versus not an ally in the group?
The communities that we serve. And the same thing for LGBTQ+, for Alphabet Soup too, talking about folks who identify within that, as well as those allies, to come together and educate the community of TechSoup and externally.
Educate them about what? What are they educating people about specifically?
Highlight other issues and observances, like, and tell these stories in different ways, and to bring positive effect, as Laura mentioned, with racial justice allyship to these communities and directly help them with the resources and programs that TechSoup has available. So,
okay. I don't know what any of this means. You haven't told us what you actually do. You haven't told us what problems you're solving. And the other thing too, if I'm part of a affinity group and I do external work with the community or whatever, am I being compensated during this? Is this a paid position to do work for the affinity group on behalf of the company, and presumably using the company's branding and logo in the process to, I mean, just essentially be a PR/advertising campaign on my own time for the company? Or is there something else going on here?
So thinking about affinity groups in that way, and employee resource groups, how taking the idea of the affinity group, how can these resource groups be resources to the organization? And that is what I want to highlight just before I get into these notes here. Actually, let me do this first so that we can get rid of the slides.
Wait. Resources to the organization. I thought they were employee resource groups. I thought that these were effectively outreach from the company to help their employees, right? So let's say, and these do exist, let's say there's a veterans employee resource group, right? Whatever that means, okay? So someone in the company is a veteran, and let's say they're trying to get back into civilian life after service, okay? And there's one or two people in the company, and I would think that this would be an extension of human resources, but okay, let's say that there's someone who works alongside human resources who is themselves a veteran and has, gone through the hoops before about, I don't know, getting in touch with the VA or finding mental health services or things like that. And so this is somebody, some ambassador that I, as a veteran employee, could go to and say, hey, I need to find out about XYZ PDQ, or, I don't know what the company makes available to someone in my position. And they'll go like, oh, well, here, let me point you to the place in the employee handbook, or here's the resources available, the end. That's what I would imagine an employee resource for someone who's in a specific situation, how that would work. Why does it need to be cliques? Why does it need to be clubs based around a specific, demographic element of my makeup? What purpose does that serve fundamentally in furthering the goals of the business? Does that not create a weird kind of division, separation, and competition between people on the basis of things that have absolutely nothing to do with their ability to do their jobs? And isn't it a bit intrusive on the one hand? Isn't it a bit judgmental when you're talking about those who are committed to racial justice? So if I'm not part of that group, or I decline to be involved in it, then what? What's that supposed to say about me? You see where it might be some problems sort of just baked into the cake here?
So going back a little bit, as Laura mentioned, talking about Bridge and the Diversity Council, and then Alphabet Soup, which is again the LGBTQ+ affinity group, was kind of the first one to grow organically out of Bridge. And then after that came racial justice allyship. And we've heard about those two a little bit. And Alphabet Soup within our organization, from what I've seen from being here since June, has provided slide deck resources about Pride and the history of Pride. Has hosted events educating us about what LGBTQ issues and advocacy looks like within the United States and within other parts of the world.
Okay, but again, how does that serve the goals of the company? Is this work being compensated by the company while it's being done, or is it being done on the employee's own time, but in the name of the company? Thank you, Chicago Mike. Accomplices: Mr. White, Mr. Pink, Mr. Orange, Mr. Blonde, Mr. Blue, Mr. Brown. Now you can't be Mr. Black because Mr. Black's on another job. Just so you know. Thank you, Chicago Mike. And a couple other hellos while I'm seeing the chat here. Data Wasteland, Arc 210, Blitz 0, Simon Willikins, and anybody else that I'm seeing? I'm not seeing. Uzi Q and Payar D. Bayar. Good morning.
And continuing to be a resource to us to make sure that we are including those voices within the work that we do.
Aren't you excluding a whole bunch of people in the process? Here's a thought. If you just accepted your employees for their work performance and their general attitude and didn't inquire and interrogate about their personal lives, do you think people would feel more or less included for not being assessed on things that say nothing about their character? Which do you think would be a more inclusive, unifying philosophy in the workplace, do you think?
So moving on to junior professionals, that started, actually, let me bounce back. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we formalize the program. And by formalizing it, what we mean here is just creating a more formal way of creating affinity groups at TechSoup.
A more formal way of dividing people up on the basis of aesthetics, essentially, more or less. Okay. And?
Yes, and also Erin is here. So give Erin a huge shout out and thank you for the work that you do with this affinity group and all of the other work that you've been doing at TechSoup. So what it means when we're talking about formalizing the program was creating an affinity group policy. And what that policy highlights is the purpose of affinity groups at TechSoup, the procedure for forming an affinity group, which I'll talk about in a second, but mostly is submitting a request form. And then we recommend meeting with the equity, inclusion, diversity, and culture team for ways of gaining support. And
so if I want to start a Christian group, if I want to start a Jewish group, if I want to start a Muslim group, if I want to start a Asian American group, what about a stamp collectors group? What if I'm an entomologist? I mean, how granular or how delicate a topic or heading can we get into once you've opened up this door? I wonder. How much risk are you willing to take towards edging near legal troubles when it comes to maintaining programs and groups and so on that I mean, you can join and be an ally. I mean, you can be in this group and not be part of the specific demographic and be an ally. We're not saying you can't join it. You'll just be sort of a subcategory of person in this group.
And then we also include the discrimination and harassment policies within TechSoup and the resources that TechSoup will allocate to affinity groups, which at this time is virtual tools, our meeting softwares, things like that.
Virtual tools, your meeting software. So a Zoom call? Wow, that's a big dedication of resources there. Yeah, Zoom or Skype or something. Boy, those are hard to come by. Okay, so do you conduct these things through the company-owned and company-licensed software then? Okay, maybe. I don't know.
And then it also talks about the details of what activities affinity groups, what are activities that we can approve for affinity groups, which would be internal networking, internal and external events, being a resource for business needs, and then community engagement.
Okay, and again, I know I'm keep asking the question, but I hope they bring it up. Is the external off the work hours labor being dedicated to these things, is that compensated for? Or am I just an unpaid ambassador for the organization and that's it? How does this work?
So with that, we've also created a affinity group request form, and that form identifies who the founding members are, what the mission statement is for the affinity group, and its intended activities, again, which would be internal networking, internal, external events, business needs, and community engagement.
Okay, so I have to make a business case to you how my affinity group is going to improve or contribute to the company's well-being. Okay. And
that form is reviewed by the Equity, Inclusion, Diversity, and Culture team, the EIDC team, and some folks from People and Culture.
Okay.
So with that, going back now to talk about junior professionals. Junior professionals
sounds like the only group described thus far that has any utility to the improvement of a company's fortunes, let's say. Professional development, cross-training, etc. It's the only one out of there that sounds like something that would actually make some kind of sense as a program or a policy within a company that doesn't discriminate on the basis of things that have absolutely nothing to do with one's personal skills, merit, character, etc. So of all of them, that's the one I'm like, okay, I don't know why you need a group for that. Why don't you just have like a rotation? Like every 3 months you have to go spend a couple of days doing somebody else's job or something. It doesn't have to be that complicated. But yeah, okay, this one sounds like the most reasonable of the four.
Came about and was the first group to use this process formally. And again, that group is for folks who identify as early or mid-career professionals.
Whoa. Identify as early or mid-career professionals? What is my tenure in the company? Or what is my work experience in the area in which I'm working in? I identify as a early or mid-career individual. Well, what if I identify as a senior executive? Do I then get to take the office? Okay, cross-training and professional development is good for anybody at any stage of their career, short of like being 3 days away from retirement. But identify as? Okay.
And one of the big events that they hosted was a brown bag event that talked about career growth, which is a professional development opportunity that we were able to have within TechSoup.
And you could not have done this prior to the creation of the EIDC Council. There was no thought at professional development, cross-training, having some kind of program within the company or companies to enrich people's work skills and so on prior to this. It's entirely possible. I don't see what that has to do with the overall theme of affinity groups, because career tenure isn't an identity. It's just a fact of life and experience. At least it's something that is reflective of one's merit, unless I decide to identify as something I'm not.
For these junior professionals, as well as hosting some networking opportunities throughout the year. And then lastly, talking about Black allies, this really came about because we want to, again, highlight these voices of Black folks.
So highlight voices on the basis of race, okay?
African folks and the different folks within the diaspora and our allies
And our allies. Okay, what constitutes an ally? I can only assume an ally is anyone that falls within the group who does not have a particular skin color. Correct?
Work on funding, research and opportunities to build programs for Black-led nonprofits.
Oh, Black-led nonprofits. Okay, so you have a group within your organization specifically working towards I don't know, targeting and highlighting other groups on the basis of the race of the people who run them. Okay.
And we're also working on a cross-collaborative event with Alphabet Soup for June that highlights both Juneteenth and Pride. And we're very excited about that because we want to acknowledge the intersection of this identity and give voice to it as well.
It's not an identity. Race is not an identity unless you're a racist. If I can look at you and know something about you simply on the basis of your skin color, if that's my way of thinking about the world, I just might be a racist. If I can look at you and think I know something about you simply on the basis of your gender that's outside of something purely biological as a reasonable assumption, I might just be a sexist. If I come to know something about you, the person, who you are on the basis of your skin color or your gender or your sexuality, if I happen to know it, that might say something about me more than it is identifying you.
So with that, if you have questions for me, for anyone who's spoken already, please put that in the chat. Thank you all for letting us talk about what it looks like at TechSoup.
You haven't really said anything about what you do. You've described in abstracts and not really said, like, again, I know this is very complicated to ask, but there was a problem. You identified you had a problem. You created these groups in order to create a solution to said problem. And now the situation is this versus what it was before. That's kind of what I would hope to hear. Like, what are your success stories? Give us a success story, how you solved something.
And I'll pass it back to Anita.
That was amazing. And I love that you stopped and took the time to explain what Affinity, because a lot of people said they didn't know why they were here. They're just here to learn. And I love that you all are here to learn.
Oh, I'm here to learn. I mean, I always come into these things and I say to myself, well, I already know what this is about. I've already listened to these things a million times before. I already know what it's about. But here's the thing. Almost to a one. You never know what the next new definition, new rationalization, new explanation is going to be. So I always come into these things ready to learn something new.
Because as you can see, you can start affinity groups in your nonprofit to find out what your community needs. Oftentimes we as organizers or founders, we're busy doing the work, but we have to bring the people from the outside in so they can tell us what they need as well.
I have no idea what that means. You have to form the affinity group to find out what people need. So which came first, the chicken or the egg? Is that like going into the affinity group in order to find out how I'm oppressing people or something? So
with that being said, I wanted to introduce Mariah Butler. I was in a meeting, a separate meeting from TechSoup with
that name sounds familiar. Do we know Mariah Butler?
Mariah present, and she works for a for-profit company, but she can tell you more about it. Mariah, go ahead and unmute yourself and you tell the story about how you started Employee Resource Group at your company.
So my name is Mariah Butler. I am a global talent analyst at AIG.
Global talent analyst at AIG. Okay. I don't know. For some reason, that name sounds familiar to me. Maybe. Thank you, Chicago Mike. I identify as an airplane. Can I start a group of people that identify as flying objects? Well, the test I'd always be curious to find out from the companies that promote employee resource groups, and they start divvying people up on these things. I mean, truth be told, the ones they've described are that's probably the smallest number of affinity groups I've heard described by any organization that I've looked at in the past. Because usually there's something like the veterans employee resource group. You've got people with disabilities employee resource group. Things that sound like they might be reasonable. And then you have the Black resource group, the LGBTQ resource group, the women's resource group, the what's the other one I'm thinking of? my mind just blanked out. But I mean, like, yeah, whittling it down. Oh, the Latinx affinity group, etc. Well, we did a little bit of that a couple of shows back with that elementary school that was doing affinity groups. Yeah. So I'm actually kind of surprised that they only had the 4. And I'm actually kind of surprised they had one in there that had nothing to do with anything aesthetic, but, just professional development. As though that makes any sense for what the affinity groups / employee resource groups are meant to do. Because that's not, you don't identify as that. Like, I'm a mid-career professional. That's just a fact of the matter. It's not an identity. It's not an opinion. And professional development's always, or can always be beneficial for a company. Anyway, I don't know. Anyway, so Mariah Butler.
And one of the things I was able to start.
Can you guys hear that okay? Because it's a little muffled for me. Can I turn this up anymore? No, it's at the max. Let me know if you guys can hear that all right.
While I was at the company is another, as Jasmine said, it could be called affinity group, could be called employee resource group. There's many names, could be called employee business group. There's a lot of names, but I was able to start an employee resource group called an Interfaith, or faith-based employee resource group.
Oh, all right. Well, hey, I was asking about religions. Like, can you bring religions into the company and safely promote one, the other, or otherwise without risking some sort of legal challenge? Keeverdam says I can hear it. Okay. Ryan R. How about the ex-con resource group? Hey, it would make sense, right? Trying to get back into life, trying to, find ways around moving back into regular society. Why not? Okay. Religious specific ERGs. Okay. How do you dance around this one with legal considerations? I mean, and just legal risks. If somebody feels like you're highlighting this religion, but not this religion, my religion or otherwise, what do you do then?
And I'll just talk a little bit about what it is first.
Okay.
Faith is obviously something that's not naturally talked about necessarily in the workplace.
Yeah, I wonder why that is. Could it be because it's a legal minefield?
So I'll kind of break it down a little bit. And then if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take any questions. So first and foremost, what is a faith-based, or what is the faith-based employee resource group at AIG? It's an interfaith employee resource group. And
it would have to be, wouldn't it? It would have to be interfaith. It would have to be open at all, because religions can go all over the place. So yeah, all right.
And really our main pillars, so our mission is on the left-hand side, really about building a culture of inclusion and serving as an internal resource to our employees, whether whatever faith you're coming from. Whatever.
Okay, what resource do you provide a person of faith at the company? Do they have space to pray? Do they get to put up their, religious icons in some place or other? What does that look like? And what happens if you have religions represented that have vastly conflicting beliefs? What then?
Whatever background you're coming from. And really we have 4 essential pillars or building blocks. They build on top of each other. And what they are is to inform people of the foundations and the basics and experiences of their neighbor's faith.
Inform employees about the foundations and basics of their neighbor's faith. Do you know how many variants that could be person to person? I mean, do you understand that the term Christian is not a one-all, be-all set of beliefs or practices? Okay.
To develop a greater understanding. And really where that came from is, I don't know if anyone remembers back in, I believe, 2019, there was like a bombing on a mosque in New Zealand. And I remember sitting in my desk, and I was just really heartbroken by it.
Bombing in a mosque in New Zealand? Wait, you mean the Christchurch thing? The Christchurch massacre? I'm trying to think. 2019 New Zealand. Was that 2019? Maybe that was earlier. I honestly don't remember. time flies. Maybe it was earlier than 2019. I don't know.
But I felt like I really couldn't really talk about it, right? You don't really talk about faith in the workplace, and certain news maybe you don't talk about in the workplace. And so,
yeah, you know why? Because it's not appropriate for the workplace. And it also, again, at least in this country, tempts fate with civil rights laws and anti-discrimination laws, actual employer anti-discrimination laws. Okay.
I felt a little bit, one, I couldn't talk about it, but also I felt for my Muslim colleagues, maybe they didn't feel like they could talk about it either. And so on their behalf, because you assumed to know what they felt or what they thought, you decided to take action? Okay. I started kind of just writing things down about what I can do to help bring faith and to help people who want to talk about faith, bring it to work. There's
a place in sort of generalized terms where you go to talk about faith. A church or temple or a mosque or, whatever applies to your particular beliefs. That's where that goes. Is the workplace really where you want to start bringing that up?
So first, informing people about the foundations, like I said, basics, experiences. So really thinking about how you experience work as a person of faith, whether you're Christian, Muslim, Jewish, etc.
How I experience work as a person of faith. Is that more or less valuable than someone's work experience who isn't particularly faithful of anything? Why should that be important to me about anybody else's faith-based work experience?
And again, how you can bring that to work. So informing people of your neighbor's faith, that's the key. So learning about someone else, whether that be in your faith, but they practice it a little bit differently or completely outside of your faith. Secondly, we're hoping as a building block that as you begin to inform people about faith, about your neighbor's faith, that begins to mitigate any religious bias or discrimination within the workplace.
So let me get this straight. You want to mitigate religious bias and or discrimination in the workplace by highlighting individual people's personal faith and then categorizing them as one faith or one belief system, and then making this a part of the everyday and thinking about their experience based on their faith in the workplace. What if, I know this is crazy. I know it's nuts. What if one's faith was an irrelevancy when it came to the workplace, outside of, religious holidays or observances and things? All right, what if that was a non-factor and everyone just did their jobs in the workplace and didn't worry about each other's personal lives to this degree? And I'm going to sound mercenary again about this. What does this do to benefit the company's bottom line? I'll be very capitalist for a second here. And how does this reduce the likelihood of a legal problem when it comes to civil rights laws?
Encourage intellectual curiosity. The next building block is to empower folks, empower employees to be able to discuss their ideas and beliefs about faith. So
what if I don't want to? What if that's my personal business? If I get interrogated about my faith and I decide not to talk about it, does that put me on some kind of, abstract list of people who aren't participating? It's not the company's business. Unless you tell me the business case for knowing your employees' belief systems.
So really when it comes to these identities within any kind of diversity dimension, you really want people to be able to bring their whole self to work.
Their whole self to work. Yes. I eliminate professional distance, make work and life conjoined one to another. So I'm never really off the clock, but I'm only being paid for certain hours of the day. Yeah.
But whatever that is, and as appropriate, of course.
Whoa, wait. As appropriate? What's appropriate? Are you going to? Okay, so there is some considerations here for appropriateness. Okay, well, where's the line? If I'm being empowered to discuss my ideas, beliefs about faith in the workplace, and my ideas and beliefs about faith are drastically in contradiction to, let's say, the existence of one of the other affinity groups, let's just say, what happens then? Am I at fault for expressing my beliefs and ideas about faith in the workplace when I was told that's what they wanted me to do? Or is the company at fault for setting up a complete catastrophe of a PR nightmare? Okay. What if somebody's faith and beliefs are particularly, negative towards empowered women? What happens then?
But really being able to have people talk about things that they do in their daily lives. So when you're kind of at the water cooler, and I know we're in the remote workforce, but when people do get back to work, when you're at the water cooler, when you're talking to someone, being able to say, hey, like, what did you do this weekend?
Yes, because as we know, prior to the existence of ERGs, no one at the proverbial water cooler could ask somebody else, hey, what'd you do this weekend?
Maybe you went to the synagogue.
Maybe I sat at home and barbecued hot dogs. Maybe it's none of your business. Why? So, because there was a shooting at a mosque in New Zealand, now you've set up a system within your company for interrogating people on their beliefs, their religious beliefs. Okay.
You went to church. Maybe you did a faith-based activity. So empowering people to have those kinds of discussions.
Okay. If someone really wanted to talk about going to church on the weekend, what was stopping them from doing that previously? Right? I mean, when appropriate or in an appropriate way. What is... Boy, oh boy. I asked for it. No, I mean, I asked for it. I said, well, what about a religious-based affinity group? Well, here we have it. And, I'm not advocating for them so much as I'm like, well, if you're going to open up the door to defining people on the basis of these other, non-determinative factors, what about other things that are very intrinsic to people's lives, like their faith? I mean, you open the door, and these are the questions I have. And are these really the kind of liabilities any particular company wants to take on? Because, there be dragons when you open up a door like this into the workplace. I can't believe that they haven't thought about that, or that they've completely dismissed the potential risks they're putting themselves in.
And then next, which I think will be helpful for those on the call, is connecting faith and work together. And we've been able to kind of impact the business in this way. So one way to connect faith and work is one for employees to be empowered by bringing kind of those good faith principles that are similar among the faiths, to be able to have an engaged and purpose-driven workforce, right?
An engaged and purpose-driven workforce with the commonalities in values between religions. Okay. All right. Well, then I'll ask the question. What were your percentages before this was instituted, and what are your percentages now on work output? I don't know, the bottom line stuff. Like how has this benefited the company in a tangible manner? For all your intentions, what's actually come out of it?
Right. And that could be applicable to your nonprofit, right? Helping people to be more engaged. Secondly, from a for-profit business, being able to connect faith and business together. So what that may look like. So just tangibly,
first thing we do, get rid of all the lawyers. No, it's with what the money lenders, right? What was it? The money lenders? Something about that. See, I'm not particularly religious, so I'm spouting off things that are coming to my mind about how profit and wealth and so on are not the end all be all when it comes to most religious teachings. I'm not saying that doesn't become a factor when it comes to churches and, evangelists and so on. But so you want to conjoin the business resources for faith-based markets. You want to use your employees' religious beliefs as leverage into faith-based markets. All right. Well, there you go.
Within AIG, it may mean that maybe because we're not talking about faith, we are not thinking of opportunities in the faith-based market. So ensuring faith-related organizations, connecting with faith-related organizations or faith-based markets, maybe we're just completely missing that because faith is sort of a taboo in the workplace. And so,
gosh, why is it a taboo in the workplace? Why is bringing up people's religions in the workplace a taboo? Why is it something that is discouraged from becoming an issue in the workplace? I can't imagine.
That's one aspect. Another aspect that I think some of you will be interested in as well is one of the things that we got to do is what some for-profit companies do is they are able to match a 2-to-1 match, provide a matching grant to any nonprofit that one of their employees give to. And so one of the things that we were able to influence is a policy that we had at our company. And that particular policy, it was a little confusing in terms of could we, as an employee, if I gave to a church or a synagogue or a mosque or what have you, could I ask for a 2-to-1 matching grant? So can I go to the company and ask for that matching grant? And so the policy was a little bit confusing as to whether we can do that or not. And so we worked with the company and we were actually able to change the policy and make it clear that employees can actually, if I were to give $2,000 to XYZ nonprofit, the company can then match that $4,000. And so that was nice to do, and one of the things that we're accomplishing and moving forward with. And so I'll pause there. I'm sure that there are questions.
My questions mainly deal with the legality of it. I mean, I'm sure it's depending on how they worded it or otherwise. I'm not implying that they're doing anything illegal. I'm just wondering, more or less, there had to have been some legal considerations for making that an option for employees. I'd be curious to know how they crafted or refined the policy to avoid, or at least try to mitigate the risk of any legal pitfalls there. Because and this is me talking about as someone who has absolutely no idea, as I'm not a legal expert or anything, as to what is or is not allowed from a private company or a for-profit business in giving money to specific religious organizations or otherwise. I mean, I'm assuming there's not that many, hoops for it. But at the same time, I'm just wondering then, I'm thinking about like Hobby Lobby, right? A Hobby Lobby that, their owners, I believe it was a private company or is a private company. Their owners have a specific religious affiliation or orientation, and they make no bones about that, and that's perfectly fine. But if you have a company that is not expressly based around a particular faith, and then you have multiple people coming to you from different churches or different faiths, I don't know. That's literally the line I have. I do not know, but I'd be curious to find out. I don't think we're going to find out here, but.
And I'm sure I'm happy to answer any. Well, and I know we're in the tech space, so I don't know if this is actually something that is done in tech areas as well. So there are some companies that have it.
Okay.
Let's go to that slide really quick. I'm sure you're probably thinking, who has this? There are companies that do have faith-based employee research.
Whoa. Okay. Ooh, Accenture. Yes, Accenture. Accenture is one of my favorites because Accenture, that was one of the first times in one of my videos where an executive from a company didn't couch their language. You can find that video, obviously, on my YouTube channel. I think it's called Unfiltered Diversity. The guy on the stage just let rip, and he didn't make any bones, didn't make anything vague. It was something else. 21 minutes even. Let's go back a little bit here because she went through a couple of cards there. Okay. Is that the right one? Hold on.
So there.
Okay. NY Interfaith Goals and Objectives. NY, I don't know. Who we are. Business integration goals. Serve as a resource for employees and recruits regarding faith-related issues. Okay. Support AIG's businesses in identifying and capitalizing on the faith-related aspects of the insurance market. Provide input when requested to human resources / employee relations to support the handling of pertinent employee matters. Okay. Career development goals. Support a workplace culture that empowers all employees of faith to be open and comfortable. Provide opportunities for AIG employees to network and be engaged to work in more meaningful ways. Whatever that means. Community / brand enhancement goals. Enhance AIG's image as an inclusive and diverse employer by establishing alliances internally and externally to best understand and serve the needs of our diverse employee population. Corporate speak. Support AIG in networking with the interfaith community at large. And awareness education goals. Increase understanding and respect for all faiths among AIG employees, the community, and global markets. Provide opportunities to discuss faith-related beliefs and issues within the workplace. That's dangerous waters you're treading into there.
There are some companies that have it.
Okay, so this next one. The benefits of interfaith and religious-specific ERGs. Okay. There are cons. Okay, religious-specific ERG. Pros. Currently exists at AIG. But that's not a pro. That's just, okay. Finds commonalities and improve understanding among other faiths. Should that really be the business or mission of a company, an employer to their employees? Harnesses multiple faiths as a resource for further employee development, education, and increased engagement. Okay, I mean, like I said, sounds very mercenary, but how? And lastly, serves as a resource about the faith-based market segment for the business. Yeah, well, that's... Okay, the cons. Potential tensions due to different belief systems within the group. Yeah. If you start like highlighting one person's faith versus another, or, encouraging people to be, okay. Next, broader discussions on religious theologies and opinions with less room for granular conversations. What? How to avoid, okay, intentional programming on commonalities. Good gravy. Focus on most practiced faiths for deeper dive discussions. Wait, focus on most practiced faiths. All right, well, how's about this? In my branch of your company, let's just say I'm the manager in that branch of the company. And in this branch of the company, most of my employees are Jewish. Okay. And one of my employees is Christian. So the most practiced faith in my branch of the company would be Judaism. So I'm to focus on that to the exclusion of the Christian guy? What happens then? What happens when that, Christian individual goes off to a civil rights attorney, and then they ask for all of our documentation on our religious specific ERGs, and that point is specifically there. When it's written down that in order to avoid religious tensions, you're going to focus on the most practiced faith. Are you nuts? Okay, and then they have a second block of pros and cons. Pros, fosters tight-knit employee bonds. I think it would foster tight-knit cliques divided along religious lines. Deeper dive into religious texts and theologies for increased employee knowledge and engagement. AIG endorses what? Company time for Bible study? What? Greater expertise for specific faith-based market segments. Cons. Possible risk of being perceived as exclusive. Possible risk. Did you read the last bullet point on your first con list? Possible risk. How to avoid. All religious-specific ERGs will be open to anyone regardless of faith background. Then why have religious-specific ERGs? Why even title them with a specific religion? Religious-specific ERGs will take a non-denominational approach. You have got to be kidding me.
What the fuck are you talking about?
What the fuck is this? What the fuck is this? Right?
Okay, I know that was of my two WTF stingers there, that was the most TEDx specific one, but I clicked. My mouse found WTF and I clicked, but either way, same sentiment. Religious specific ERGs will take a non-denominational approach. And last point, emphasize this is not a church, temple, or mosque. You're encouraging people to speak their minds on their religious faiths, to discuss and analyze religious texts in the workplace. You're encouraging religious-specific ERGs by title within the workplace to expand people's knowledge and, dare I say, risk just having people proselytizing to other employees. And you say this is not a church, temple, or a mosque. Well, you tell me, what elements of activities that take place in a church are not represented in your own documentation? What elements of activities that take place in a church, temple, or mosque are not represented in your list of guidelines and policies? Because, you know, someone could be, religiously or otherwise, forgiven for thinking that you're turning employee time and space into mini churches, mini temples, mini mosques. Are you kidding me right now? Good gravy. Okay. Back to 21 minutes even or thereabouts. Let's see. We've got about 15 minutes left in my hour and a half long time. So let's keep going.
There are companies that do have faith-based employee resource group, and it is a growing area. So I'll pause it here.
Okay. So all those companies have faith-based ERGs. So Aetna, KeyBank, JP Morgan, American Express, BNP, Blue Cross Blue Shield, T-Bank, GT Bank, whatever that is, Google, Intel, Apple, LinkedIn, AOL, Facebook, Texas Instruments, Dell, CVS, Coca-Cola, Accenture, Merck, Salesforce, Deloitte, Ford, Fiat, Toyota, Rockwell Automation. All of those companies have internal faith-based ERGs. Wow. Okay, well, hey, I guess if everybody's doing it, there must be no problems with it, or risks, or workplace culture issues.
Wow, that was awesome. Thank you, Mariah. So we want to open it up to everyone. If you have a question, go ahead and use the raise your hand option. You can ask Mariah. I saw Aaron in the chat room. Jasmine.
Wait, is that the totality of the presentation? Now it's question time? Really? Okay.
Mariah, will you stop sharing your screen? And also Laura, she's only going to be here for a few more minutes. So if you have a question of either one of them, or if you just want to say, hey, I just...
This guy. The look on this guy's face, I don't know. There's something about his posture.
Learn something new today, because I certainly did. Feel free to unmute yourself, or actually use the raise your hand option so everybody don't unmute at the same time.
Yeah, don't do that.
Okay, Terry Allred.
Hi, everybody. So I run a nonprofit consortium in Rochester, Minnesota, and we have about 90 members.
Okay.
And many of our nonprofits are so small that they can't actually sustain affinity groups within them. And
what does her arm do? Is she petting a cat or something?
So the consortium has been talking about the possibility of setting up some affinity groups that would be cross-organizational, so that way, I mean, it's all within the nonprofit ecosystem, but it would be for the community as opposed to any individual nonprofit. And we, as the consortium, could resource those groups. But I just am wondering.
Whoa. So you want to have a non-organization specific affiliated affinity group? What? So, what is like a Facebook group? That's okay. How would that work exactly? Because if it's a consortium, so you want to set up an external, essentially third-party affinity group to support employees from multiple organizations, but which is funded by the multiple organizations, but is not beholden to any one of them. Okay.
Do y'all have any thoughts about that?
Yeah,
things
I have
we
several.
Should be considering prior to setting up any just words of wisdom in that scenario?
Excellent question. I would like all three of you to answer. Laura, if you have Mariah, and Jasmine. We'll start with Laura, if you have any comments for Terry.
I mean, my initial reaction is that sounds like a great solution to the issue of not having enough staff at each nonprofit to maybe make up a substantial affinity group or ERG.
Yeah. So you want to set up, again, a third-party organization based around a specific either demographic or ideological pursuit, because there are no currently existing organizations that cover any of that stuff that you wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel for. Right? I mean, there's no such thing like the NAACP. Right? Well, why not just donate to the NAACP? You know, or GLAAD. Why create a redundant organization to organizations that already exist?
And I do know, I haven't experienced it personally, but I do know there are some larger tech companies where, for instance, the women affinity group at Facebook partners with the women's affinity group at Google or something like that. So I know that is something that happens cross company or cross organizationally in the tech space. So
yeah, but see, here's the thing. If they can't say this is the Facebook women's affinity group, if they can't put their brand name on it, then what's the point? Same with Google, same with any other company. Why would you want a non-corporate associated organization as your go-to for these things when you can have one with your own brand name on it? I mean, the one thing that I did at least respect the truthfulness in that religious or interfaith scheme is that at least they admitted that part of the function of that was to get an entryway into faith-based markets, to find more customers, right, for your specific company. I don't see how a third-party ERG serves that purpose when an ERG is for that company's employees. both for the employees that are there and for the purposes of the business's interests. As much as I can see the definite pitfalls of it, I can also see the PR/marketing potential of saying that you have these ERGs and then sending your employees out for unpaid work on the basis that they're doing something for their, community/demographic. So that sounds like a terrible idea, but that's just me.
So I don't have any personal experience, but my initial reaction is I think that it is a solution that seems like it could work.
No, it's not. It is not a solution that could work. It takes away the individual company's efforts and amalgamates them into somebody else's job, a whole separate business, right? If it's a third-party, unaffiliated organization to all these other organizations, then it's no longer owned by any one of them. It's its own thing with its own leaders, its own hierarchy, its own pay structure. It defeats the entire purpose of ERGs.
Well, I think the important thing would just be to make sure that what the people who are part of that affinity group at one nonprofit bring back to their nonprofit is relevant, specifically, like that they get value out of it specifically for the culture and community and staff that they work with at the nonprofit. So making sure that all of those voices are heard and that there's value in it for everybody, because the nonprofit ecosystem is similar in a lot of ways, but all nonprofits are very different as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, how are you going to synergize, to use some corporate speak, the different cultures, mission statements, businesses, et cetera, across quote unquote nonprofits, as though, like she said, like all nonprofits are not the same. It's a category. It's not a definition. That makes absolutely no sense. It sounds like a terrible idea.
Well, so that would just be my one thought, but I'd be interested to hear what anybody else has to say.
Is anybody going to bring up the obvious problems with this idea?
Well,
No?
Go ahead, Jasmine.
I was just going to say quickly to Laura's point, and also with being so small, one thing that could be beneficial is to start out with something like what we have as Bridge as a Diversity Council, where folks from the different affinities can come together and then have DEI specific or equity specific goals that can be embedded into the work that is being done within your nonprofit. That may be a good place to start.
What? Okay. How many affinities are there? What counts as an affinity? See, once you open the door to trying to assess people on the basis of things that are either literally unimportant to their ability to do their jobs, literally have no definition as to who they are, and simply aspects of what they are. When you start opening the door to start making a value system out of that, you create a whole lot of questions and a whole lot of problems for yourself that you didn't need before this. I have to wonder, are the people who run these affinity groups or organize this or anything else, are they working more or less for the company now than they were before they existed? The ERGs existed, I mean. Is more of their own free time being spent for the company or less now because of ERGs? I think I know the answer. So you might also imagine what the utility there is for the companies in getting a whole bunch of their employees to start putting PR effort on the company's behalf on their own time into new markets.
As you continue to grow.
All right, that's it. Okay, but that aside, what our speaker here just said had nothing to do with the lady's idea. So,
thank you. I should have mentioned we host a citywide commitment to racial justice that has a bunch of programming already involved, and so all these nonprofits are already involved with this umbrella project, the Commitment to Racial Justice for our city.
Okay, so you're asking if it would be a good idea, but you're already doing it. Did I miss something? Right, so multiple organizations are contributing to a specific cause. This has been done before. I don't know if you know this, such a scheme has been implemented before in several other ways, in several other instances. Okay, nobody cares.
That's good. Thank you for sharing that. I saw someone else raise their hand, but they put it down when I called on Terry. I don't want to miss you because every question is important.
I'll let one more question come through and we'll cover it, and then I'll wrap up the show, guys.
Okay, while you're still thinking about whether you want to ask that question, I do have a question, and this is for anybody, Jasmine, Mariah.
How about me?
Answer this.
Okay.
What's the best way to start an ERG or an Affinity group?
The best way to start. Well, the lady said they had an application process. So there you go. I guess you would have to show the company, and this is just my thinking, you'd have to show the company that there is effectively there's a business case to create an affinity group, to dedicate company resources, facilities, money, etc., to whatever it is. And like the lady said, you have to outline what activities will you do. I mean, I did this myself more or less in college when I created the BDSM club. I had to fill out a form like who are going to be the leaders and who's going to be the treasurer and what will you use the resources of the school for and this, that, and the other. I had to fill out a form. It's like creating an associated student club, because that's what it is. It's a club in service to the business, except based around some really touchy subjects when it comes to EEOC law.
Jasmine, you gave some highlights, but what's the best way to start one for everybody here to say, I just learned something new today. I think I'll do that. What's the best way to start?
Whoa. Okay, that was the show, not me.
So from my experience, I'd say find someone who is really passionate and can sell why the affinity group or ERG, whatever your organization wants to call it, why it's important to the organization, and can share that with other people.
What happens if I make a pitch for an ERG and the company and I'm denied? Right. I mean, especially if the ERG I'm pitching is based either on orientation or race or gender or now religion. What if my case is rejected? What happens then? What do I as an individual under one of those categories do if a company is denying me the ability to either express myself or organize in a way that you're allowing other demographics to organize and have resources? What would happen then? What would my avenue of appeal be at that point? Because I tell you what, I think I might have grounds for a civil rights lawsuit against that company. I just might. But I think I'll leave that there for the moment. I'll go to you guys for a second here and see if there's anything you wanted to say. Spittlebuggies, Scribelight, I'm pretty sure there are different rules for nonprofit organizations compared for for-profit companies. Probably, depending on the state, but I know my state has differences. Yeah, that's the thing. I don't know. I don't know what the laws are for whatever implications there might be for ERGs and nonprofits versus for-profits or donations, et cetera, and so forth. I don't know. So I'm not speaking as an authority on that. I'm just curious. That's why I was hoping, they would say something about that, but they haven't. So Ryan R., isn't that just what normal people do in their free time? Join groups regarding things that interest them? Yeah. Why is it the company's business? Why is it the employer's business for some of these things? And again, I have to ask, why would companies want to roll the dice on the legality of opening these doors to conflict within their own companies or discrimination or categorization? They showed a whole bunch of companies that have religious groups within their organization. So it's like, wow, it's obviously a relatively common practice. I'd be curious to know if they'd ever reveal any conflicts or problems they've had, because it seems to me that just opens up the door of a whole lot of problems. Let's see, Renovatio, because they want to funnel money allocated to themselves and not to other groups. Well, yeah, obviously. Check your logic. Her audio is terrible. I tell you what, for all these, whichever organizations is providing the equipment and or software necessary for their employees in the different speakers here, that you can't really tell what they're saying, or it all sounds like it's coming through a wet blanket or something. This should be a signal that they need to upgrade their systems. Just saying. Let's see. Check your logic again. So, Skyblight, you were the one who broke the news on Lords of the Night when Satsu was talking about his fuckatry. Which news? What? We broke a lot of news on Lords of the Night. You'll need to specify. Bridget. Why not a general faith ERG that helps employees get days off for their holidays and support for important practices, securing a room for the daily prayers Muslims must do? I mean, something like that that's very, very high level, right? That's very sort of deals with sort of the basic necessities or, instances that are going to come up with people who practice faith and are in your company. I could see that would be fine. Right, just an interfaith ERG, and that the only things that they do is, advocate for, or help you with HR or your supervisor for scheduling your days off on the basis of observances, and then make accommodations for people to practice their faith, aside on a break time or something, but that'd be fine, I think. I mean, I'm pretty sure. But outside of that, talking about specific texts amongst your other employees, educating other employees about your faith and so on, effectively proselytizing within the workplace. That's the stuff that makes me kind of go, I don't know. Let's see. Oh, did Christchurch? Oh, did we break the news about Christchurch? I don't recall that. I'll take your word for it. We 4 years of Lords of the Night goes by, man. A big blur of news stories and things and like that. But man, it's just But between that and when Trump bombed Syria, that happened like right when we were going on the air and everything. Yeah. Oh, memories. Anyway, everyone, I'm going to call that here. So another round of professionals discussing ERGs, and I think for the first time, I could be mistaken, but I think for the first time going in depth on religious-based ERGs. Like I say, as far as I can recall, every time I've looked at a panel discussion or something regarding these things, they've never brought up religion, at least not as directly or as in this much detail, at least. But that's very interesting to me. I'm very interested in that. I'm curious to find out if it's all publicly available, what and or to what degree companies have run into problems in practicing their religious ERGs in the way described by our speaker. But that might be a topic for another show. Either way, everyone, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you learned something. I think I learned something. If you'd like to hear more from me, you can find me here next Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for TED Excellence, where I'll once again take a look at another off-brand TED Talk for information and education. I call it channel content. But until then, everyone, I hope you all have a good rest of your Sunday. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things, even though everyone here is so well behaved. You have very, very little to do. Everybody who donated, either to myself or certainly, if you take a look at the top of the chat box, to the GoFundMe's up there for our friends. We really do appreciate it. Thank you so much for your generosity. And for all of you, I hope you're all safe and well. If you are not well, please get well soon, and I will see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.